and welcome to the Amplifying Scientific Innovation video podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sophia Ononye-Onyia, founder and CEO of the Sophia Consulting Firm, a WeBank certified life science marketing and communications consultancy that was established in New York City with the goal of amplifying scientific innovation. The goal of this podcast is to showcase the importance of science advocacy, health equity, and influential leadership through conversations with senior life science leaders who will share their unique perspective on their leadership journey, corporate vision, and industry outlook. My guest today is Dr. Funso Olufade, founder of Devoted Skies, a recognized 501c3 organization that is bridging healthcare inequity by providing emergency medical supplies to rural communities in developing countries. Funso and I connected on LinkedIn based on our shared Nigerian heritage and interest in health equity. I'm truly proud of the work that he's doing in places like Latin America and Sub-Saharan Africa. And it's truly a pleasure to welcome you to the show, Dr. Olufade.
Thank you very much, Sophia. It is a true honor to be sharing the stage with you and get to talk about a mutual interest that we have in this equity of health.
Yes, absolutely. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in. I would love to hear, what is your definition of scientific innovation?
It's a great question. And, I often hear people talk about innovation as something that might have a tangible output. But probably unlike any other guest you've had on the show, my view of this is that innovation could be tangible or intangible. As long as there is a rigorous scientific framework that one can learn from and adapt over time. I think that is really what I consider innovation, creating that framework where you could test and retest, improve, and use as a platform to further develop and improve either anything, drug development, if it's processes on how you do things. I think that's scientific. That framework that you do it by is what I believe is scientific.
Well, I like that definition. It's called research, right? Because the whole process is iterative. It's not one and done, but we have to continuously improve. So thank you for that definition.
Absolutely, absolutely. But in addition to that, though, because the show is called Amplifying that scientific framework, and I think this is where my biotech finance executive hat comes in, is that amplification cannot take place without resources, as you know.
Right. Absolutely.
So, being able to provide the resources to get this framework, this development process to the next level is really what comes down to. So yes, a lot of innovative stuff come out, but how do we make it known? How do we make it reach the mass audience and access to people? That is really what I believe is also important.
I like that. It's really important, I think, and it ties back into that shared passion that we have for health equity, right? And I can't wait to get into that. But now I want to put a global map in front of us. So you are truly a global citizen. So how did living in multiple continents, including, of course, my native land of Nigeria, influence your interest in addressing diversity and inclusion in healthcare?
Yeah, now another great question, but again, it's what makes all of us who we are, right? The different pieces of experiences that we've had is really what makes us who we are. And my story is no different. I just happened to, be born of African descent, grew up in the US, lived in Europe professionally. And I think all of these pieces is really what has shaped my values and my perceptions into how the world should be. Relative to my nonprofit organization, Devoted Skies, what I've observed in my time and travels is that there is a stark disparity in terms of people's access to healthcare. Right? So that's well known. But how do you really now improve that? The first step, in my opinion, in working with all these different agencies of this country is really start with engagement. Because if these people, members of these communities, have been so disengaged for so long, engaging them back in the conversation, be it clinical trials, being modern medicine availability, being testing diagnostics, or even wellness, re-engaging them back in modern care is really what's critical. And that's been my observation throughout where I've traveled and I've lived.
I love that. I think it's really important to think about patient-centered care, and that's that engagement that you're talking about. And it's really important to think about the multinational, the global viewpoint, because depending on where you were born, your story could be, of course, different, right? So those are those social determinants of health. Now, I know because we had a chat, and you just returned from your access trip to Costa Rica and Ghana, which is really, really phenomenal. I think within the past 24 hours. So as much as you can you provide a top-line overview of your pioneering work at Devoted Skies?
Yeah. No, thank you, Sophia. Yeah, so I said, I'm not jet lagged. I think I'm just a little bit floating and a little bit disoriented. 48 hours ago, I arrived back from Costa Rica, but before that was the trip to Accra, Ghana. But the trip in itself is just the event. I think it's the pre-work to go into these countries and meeting with these healthcare officials is really what's critical. Getting to understand the communities that we are actually going to help do this outreach, it's what's also critical. So, for example, in our trip to Costa Rica, it was all about needs assessments, understanding the local communities, understanding the different stakeholders in healthcare delivery is what we tried to uncover, right? So we met with pharmacists, we met with primary care physicians, we went with zonal medical directors, just to understand how healthcare is delivered within the country. The bulk of our work is when we get back to the States and we now reach out back to them as how can we help support, either connecting them to a teaching hospital within the States or actually making a second trip back with clinicians. So that's the Costa Rica trip. The second part of this, with other countries that we've been in, and Ghana is the example with that, is what we do is we actually, before we go there, actually provide medical supplies based on donations from some of our sponsors and donors. Right. But that's just half of the equation, right? We've profiled the community, we understand what their basic needs are, and they're all primary care based. Hypertension, diabetes management. Those are the things these communities need, the basic form of healthcare. But during our visit, what we try to understand is the wellness aspect of it, the social determinants of health. What are the barriers that the patients within this community face to be able to access some of this care? And that's when you get to everything from logistics, transportation, sometimes security are some of these hurdles. Right. It is a passion of mine, but I believe every one of us can actually contribute in helping bridge this gap that exists. Wow. So those are the learnings, and that's what I'm bringing back to continue to advocate that there are remote and deepest part of the world that, every little bit can help. Right. And, lives and patients can benefit from what we have in America, in the Western world, to be able to help advance patient care. So those are just some of my learnings, and again, open to continue to do that in the near future.
Yeah, that is truly inspirational. I think that it starts with that grassroots needs assessment. You cannot assume that you know the problems of developing countries if you never actually step into developing countries. So I think the fact that you're taking the time to visit these countries, to meet with their leaders, and to think about how to shape the path for the future is really phenomenal. And I truly applaud you on the work that you're doing. Bravo.
Thank you, Sophia. It's I call it rethinking capitalism, right? The fact is, again, working in finance and biotech, there are these rules that we apply in the Western world to how drug discovery, commercialization, and how all these things should be. But right. If we really truly want to be altruistic, I think we need to rethink how we do some of the things we do, because the threat, disequity in all these parts of the world is a threat to what we benefit from in the developed countries. So that's why I do what we do.
Exactly. And I love that. And I think you also mentioned earlier when you were defining scientific innovation, you mentioned the importance of investment in advancing innovation. And I imagine that as a Black man here in America, there are some unique challenges that you would face in terms of leadership and fundraising. So what are some of these challenges and what coping strategies have you adopted over the years?
Yeah. Great question. And again, two hats that I'm wearing here. The first, as in the nonprofit world, again, what I try to be authentic, about who I am and what I bring to the table. right? Because the fact is, there's a lot of mistrust in general in the society around, what impact donations have. But by being able to establish that here is who I am, and this is why this cause is really important, I think initially there are hurdles, but you can get over that with time. Perseverance does help. Resilience does help. Nonprofit at times, I think, is harder than the for-profit world. But again, believing in the cause and having the right partners, the board of directors, be it the volunteers or mentors, has really gotten me through some of those hurdles. Absolutely. On the professional side, as far as what it means to be an executive within the biotech pharma industry, a person of minority, again, it's about wearing the cloak, who you are, taking that to the boardroom every day, to the interviews, and disclosing and being transparent about that. I think trust will be built over time, and empathy is really what you need to be able to put yourselves in their shoes. They need to be put themselves in your shoes, and that is really how opportunities does become available to people within the industry.
I love that. Authenticity and empathy actually breeds trust, right? And that would help to sort of showcase your unique leadership and the principles and values that you treasure. But I wanted to piggyback on something you mentioned about the differences between the for-profit and the nonprofit world. Can you dive into that a little bit? And again, what have you learned that you can share with our audience so that they can grow from your experiences as well?
Yeah. No, again, it's what I'm living every day. The first is in the for-profit world. Sometimes it could be transactional. Again, we all go to work, we contribute with hopefully delivering value within our organizations, and we get paid for it. Monthly salaries, annual bonuses, all of those things. But in the for-profit world, it really is about passion for what you believe in, a cause that you really believe in. I went into this, frankly, with a naive mindset that, this can be done. What I failed to realize is the amount of informing, amount of education, and amount of people just didn't know these disparities existed. Right. And I think that mindset is really kind of like investing in what will eventually lead to volunteerism and donation. So you need to continue to educate and inform people in many of the different platforms that we have, social media, newsletters, continue to inform people and keep them engaged about what this equity looks like. And every now and then you get people asking you direct questions. And once they're engaged, they want to learn more, is when they could actually get to contribute and volunteer their time or resources to help advance the same cause. But it is just as hard as the for-profit world, as I mentioned.
No, I agree with you. I think that mission-driven brands are going to be the landmark of the future, because people are looking to do things that, again, amplify their own personal principles and values. And I learned about you, of course, through LinkedIn. And so those posts, as you mentioned, on social media can be quite powerful. So don't ever underestimate how much you can reach out to other people. As we continue to have this conversation, I think about mentorship, right? That's a natural sort of a component of leadership. So I'm curious to know if there are any notable mentors that have helped to shape your career journey to date.
Yeah. Now, Sophia, great question. And again, we all have been lucky to have a guy or a girl tap us on the shoulder that saw things in us even before we realized that. I am literally a living example of that. Yes, there have been mentors in different aspects of my career. I think about when I transitioned from the sciences into the finance world. And even when I went from finance to more to the commercial organization within biotech, it has to be that leader that sees something in you, or that organization that believes in you. One thing that I've realized of late, though, is the concept of reverse mentoring. So it's not just the older, more experienced, senior and successful people that you can learn from, but at times it could be younger, less experienced, curious-minded people that just ask why and challenge you about why you do things the way you do. Right. So the notion of reverse mentoring has actually resonated with me highly of late. And, even from my 9-year-old son, I learned things from him. The little young guy of late, again, it does have the, asking the why question, but what is being doing of late is actually doing the inference thing, meaning right. If A plus B equals C, then C has to be greater than A. He just comes up with these concepts in his head. So a side story here is at Christmas last year, struggling with the Santa exists concept. And I think within his friends in school, they're trying to establish that, no, it's daddy and mommy. Hopefully there are no kids listening to cover their ears. But he is such a believer in the inference thing. It goes like, wait a minute. My dad will never allow my mom to buy me all these gifts. Right. So Santa must exist some way. But again, it's his mindset, right? The way you think about things, again, even from a 9-year-old, reverse mentorship is what he gave me this evening as I was getting ready for a late night call, and it exists everywhere. So we all should just try and adopt it. But more importantly, when we reach that point in our careers, send the ladder back down, tap someone else on the shoulder and show them the ropes so that they can learn from what we've learned from and benefited from going through the ladder in our careers.
I love that. I think that mentorship is truly universal. You could learn from anyone. And in turn, I've learned from my son. He's a little bit younger than your son. He's 6 months old. And he has taught me the importance of mindfulness, being present, being in the moment. And those are skills that, to your point earlier, that you could really learn from anyone. So thank you for sharing that personal story.
Thank you for sharing. See, it goes everywhere. You go from 6 months old. Just being present, being in the moment. I think we should all take advantage of that.
Absolutely. Now, my next question for you is around emerging technologies. This would not be a scientific innovation podcast if we don't talk about emerging technologies. So tell me a little bit more about any new technologies that you're currently excited about based on the ability to improve health access, health quality, or even health literacy.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Sophia. And again, in my day job in the biotech world, I think the world of cell and gene therapy is so exciting and so promising, at least for those of us that have been in industry 25 years, because you saw when the impact of oral solid molecules had on certain disease states. You've seen those evolve into, mRNA, or even if there was, enzyme-based therapies. But now the next phase of this, post-biologics, is really cell and gene therapy. The hurdle for this is much higher. We know what the success rates and probability of success with, oral solids and biologics are. With cell and gene therapy is actually much, much higher. But it holds the promise, right? Conceptually, if you think about it, isolate what gene or what cell is causing the deformity or the disease within the human being, and then find ways to either treat, delete, or replace these cells within the human bodies. Cell and gene therapy holds enormous, potential within the industry that we are really at the cusp of curative for some of these diseases. And that's what gets me excited. Even though I am not as close to it by not being in the laboratory, I read all the journals just to see what potential this holds for the future. So that is it, man. That's what gets me excited these days, Sophia.
Good. I'm a big fan of cell and gene therapy. I sit on the board of Cell and Gene, which is an online editorial really that's focused on cell and gene therapies. And a couple of our clients here at the Sophia Consulting Firm are cell and gene therapy companies like BioMarine and Cell Evolve Bio. So I think that I share that same passion. Again, what is this? The 1001 thing that we have in common. So circling back to my second to last question for today is, what are some important factors, again, in your opinion, that you believe will be important for sustaining innovation in the life science industry?
Yeah. Sustainability, a great question. In my doctoral research work, when I was in grad school, one of the things, again, this was in the Affordable Care Act realm. And again, one of the things that was happening then is big legislation, big policy that was changing healthcare within the states. The big question was this sustainable? how do we implement all of these programs? So it's not just the research and scientific innovation, but also the delivery of care itself. It affected all of that. So that's what I did my research on back then. So my perfect answer, which no one believed at the time, I think there are core principles that does this, and it's what we all do every day anyway, right? PECAPEPs. It's having the right partnerships, the economics of the program that we're trying to implement or sustain, make sure we have foresights on that. Communication around teams that are involved in this project, up and down. All of these are critical elements. Adapting when you get challenges and you're willing to, pivot, planning, evaluation, knowing your capacity. These are the tenets of the variables that I study in my dissertation research. I coined it PECAPEX for a reason, but these are things that we do every day. Like I said, your partnerships, if it's economics, understanding the communication stream, adapting when we need to, planning, evaluating, knowing what your capacity and constraints are. All of this is the way you can build a sustainable, not just a framework or scientific organization, but something that is sustainable over time. I strongly believe in that. And that's the way I approach every task that I take on.
Again, I love that your PhD is in health sciences, and for as long as you could, you help to think about organizational sustainability. And it's nice to bring that back, right? Because it's not just about what we're doing today. How do we sustain the innovation to ensure that future generations can also benefit from it? So thank you for that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So my final question is the simplest one. Do you have any other comments or thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience before we wrap today?
Yes, and I know I love what you do, Sophia, on these podcasts and video calls, because I think it's really provides a way where not just executives and business leaders and healthcare leaders get to communicate kind of what they think and their perception, but also the listeners get to benefit from these views of, perhaps high to reach individuals within the industry. One thing that I always tell younger people, mentees that I talk to, is that everyone has a role. Everyone can make an impact in terms of whatever your cause is. If it's healthcare disequity, if it's just changing your community and being able to effect change. I think believing that you can make an impact and then building that personal board of directors that can help you get to your goal is really what's critical for young adults and leaders. So I think the notion of believing in yourself and finding the right people around you that can get you there is really what I subscribe to. And I challenge, again, young adults and your listeners to build that network of friends, or that network of the personal board of directors, as I put it, to get them around them, to get them to be able to advance in their careers and also in their personal lives. That's my mantra and what I do.
Thank you for encouraging, promoting diversity of thought, and of course, amplification of scientific innovation. It's been such an enlightening discussion speaking with you today, and I'm so grateful to you for gracing us with your presence. But something tells me that we're going to bring you back on the show in a few years. Tell us more about Devoted Skies and how you've grown as a leader while your organization is growing. So thank you for what you do. It's a pleasure to know you. Absolutely,
Sophia. It is, again, definitely an honor to get to chat with you today. And again, I look forward to the opportunity to report back. You're going to hold me accountable. That's what this does, right? You're already holding me accountable. You're going to come back and tell me what you've done since we talked. I really do appreciate it. Metal sharpens metal, Sophia. That's what we say, right? So you're doing that already.
Absolutely. It is my pleasure. And again, I look forward to staying in touch, okay?
Take care. Ciao.
Take care.
Thanks, Sophia.
Thank you.